Great. So, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to this roundtable on making kin. For those who don't know, 3M Make a Tiger is a platform made by LCC photography final year students. And the festival is a 3-week-long program, now in its second week, with talks, roundtable discussions, workshops, and student spotlights. Alongside this is a space for our virtual degree show, which is going live through the website on Thursday. Today we've got with us Clementine, Sylvia, Colin, Tino, and myself, Tami. I'm going to begin with a quick introduction to all of our work and its position within the title of Making Kin. Don't know if we've lost Sylvia. Potentially. Hopefully she'll be able to make it back in. I'll start with the introduction for now. Cool. So we've got Clementine Schneiderman. She's a Welsh-based Parisian artist who works with themes of community, identity, fashion, and Clementine's project, it's called Fashion, pronounced in Welsh, which I can't do, unfortunately, is a collaboration with stylist Charlotte James and local Welsh youth clubs. Produced over the course of 3 years, it's a fashion documentary and participatory community project that challenges the static way the region has been portrayed by the media through celebrating the creativity of its younger inhabitants. Got Tino on to Sylvia.
And then Sylvia Russey is an Italian and Togolese London-based artist working with photography and video to explore ideas of memory, migration, diaspora. Sylvia graduated from our own LCC in 2016, and her most recent project, Encounter, is a fictional representation of Sylvia's family album, inspired by an image of her younger mother as a market trader. She retraced her parents' journey of migration from Togo to Italy.
Colin Pantel, he is a Bath-based photographer, writer, and lecturer. His work revolves around domestic environments and representations of family and childhood. All Quiet on the Home Front is Colin's first book, which was published in 2017. Photographed over the span of 12 years, the project captures his daughter Isabel growing up around their family home in Bath.
And I'm Tino. I'm a final year photography student at LCC. My work explores personal themes of migration, identity, and my cultural heritage through photography and performance. And my recent project is the Blue Table Project. It's a collaboration with my cousin, Marilyn, who lives in Zimbabwe, and using appropriated imagery.
And lastly, I'm Tami. I'm also a final year photography student at LCC. I'm London born and based, and I work around themes of intimacy, performance, and playfulness through the form of portraiture. My recent project, The Dogs in the Car, is a collaboration with my dad, Tony, who suffers from a short-term memory problem. And using photography to portray a sense of comic relief within illness, this father-daughter project is also about familial care and identity. So I was gonna open up about asking about how you've been during isolation in terms of image making, and considering we all photograph the home and the family and community, I was wondering whether this has been paused or pushed during lockdown.
I can start. For me, I didn't produce really. I was a bit overwhelmed by everything. I did experiment with like Zoom, like remote portraiture via Zoom with friends. That was really interesting, really pushed me to do something else. I photographed things outside my window, like there was a care home outside my window, so there were old people, there were visitors coming to the care home, but that's it. I didn't work with the children because they were at school. Well, they were at school virtually, and yeah, I didn't. I wished I was more productive, really, but that's it. Yeah.
Colin, what about yourself?
I mean, I live in Bath, so I've got an allotment, and the allotment people, they've been kind of busier than ever. So I've just been photographing there in the kind of same way that I've always done. So in some way, that side of it hasn't changed. And then we've kind of had socially distanced sort of things like, you know, people around and fires, and some of those have been quite traumatic because people have been going through quite difficult times, I think, some people. So I've got a load of photographs that I actually can't use, but they're kind of quite people going through really upsetting times and me being insensitive and photographing them. But otherwise, it's photographing that. But I have gone through, as Clementine said, the whole Zoom thing and trying to work with that. And it's phenomenally difficult trying to make images, but also get something meaningful from people. It's just really challenging and difficult. But also I went through a little phase of photographing things like the cues and the signs and the graphics of isolation. So yeah, I've been doing stuff, but I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. I have no idea what it's worth or anything. It's just kind of doing it as a kind of knee jerk, as one does anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Sylvia, what about yourself?
I guess I've been sort of forcing myself to make work at some point, and been like working with archival images, but then sort of like at the beginning of lockdown, I haven't done much. I've been quite lazy and didn't really know how to approach my practice at this time. So yeah.
Tino, and you've been using appropriation as your way of doing photography during this time?
A little.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Tami, can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, of course. I was going to say you've been using appropriation as a way of photographing during this time.
Yes, I've been using appropriated images from my cousin. So it's been kind of like a dialogue, like a conversation, an exchange, rather than work, to be honest. Yeah.
For sure. I feel like it is a really tough time, and I feel like as photographers, it means that we haven't been stopped in what we can do, and it feels like this kind of push to keep making work. And I definitely feel that the circumstances are completely different for everyone, and I'm sure some people will come out with tons of work and others will come out with nothing, but
Yeah,
it's all the same.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. A lot of us haven't really done much. I've been lazy as well, which is, I guess, another way where I've found another way of continuing to make work, but in a way where I'm still doing what I want to do, but in a way where we're still communicating, but through kind of a way where it has to be through like WhatsApp, phone, and Zoom meetings with family members. Yeah, and I guess if we just kind of move on to the fact that I guess photographers, like I know myself that when I first picked up the camera, it was to photograph family members, people that I knew, things that were close to me, something that was familiar to myself. And I'm just wondering if that's similar to other people here. You know, what was your first time picking up a camera?
Such a distant memory. Sylvia, do you know your first time picking up a camera?
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Right.
I think I'm not hearing properly. I guess, yeah, I started taking photographs when I was in high school, and I was taking a course in Modena. So I'm from the countryside, so I was traveling to Modena, going to school and then staying overnight to take this course. And my parents thought I was a bit mad because they had to come and pick me up 10:30, like driving an hour to come and pick me up. But then, yeah, I guess that's when I started, and then sort of decided to move to London to study photography. But yeah, that's all I remember about starting with photography.
Sure. Clementine, were you first starting photographing family members or local areas, or what began for you?
I think I was always very shy to approach strangers at the beginning. So I think I'm trying to remember, but I think I started to photograph mainly my mother and my grandmother because I was obsessed with women and how they looked and dresses and beauty and all these things. So I was just like visually attracted to women. And then I think by moving to Wales and like being more in a different environment, I started to have like the courage to approach strangers and connect with, you know, like other people around me. Because for a long time I was like looking at people around me, but I didn't know how to engage, how to like, you know, stop them on the street or like ask them to take the portrait. I just didn't know how to do it. And I think coming to Wales kind of like helped me to do it. But yeah, I think my mother was the first one, and then my grandmother, and then yeah.
Amazing. Colin, did you start with photographing family?
No, I started, I mean, years ago. My mother's German, and when I was a kid, my sisters, I've got two older sisters, they both went to Germany. We got relatives in Germany and Switzerland. My sisters went to Germany and then Switzerland to learn German. But I was kind of scared of my German relatives because they lived in this big empty house and they're kind of, yeah, interesting. But we had family in what was then, this is super colonial, then Southwest Africa, it's now Namibia. And someone said to me when I was about 10 years old, do you want to go to Namibia, Southwest Africa as it was then, to learn German? And so I went to learn German in Southwest Africa in a mining town called Suno, and that's the first time I had a camera. And I went to Zimbabwe, but it was Rhodesia. That is super colonial. It's like it was a very, very strange trip, and that's the first time I picked up a camera.
Yeah,
I used to think it was an old Agfa. I used to think the Agfa was the best camera in the world. It's fantastic.
I feel like it's such a classic thing for us to have to go back on, is like, when did you first pick up a camera? But I feel like it also does set off the track of who you photograph. Like, I know I started by photographing friends, and they became like my muses for like 4 whole years until I went off to university, and then it completely changed. But that, obviously, that work I wouldn't show anyone now, but it's so important in how I started to learn about photographing intimately and people close to you.
Very pure, yeah.
Sure.
Very, yeah.
So I was going to start off by talking about Sylvia. So your project Encounter won the most recent PhotoWorks Jerwood Prize. Congratulations again. However, this isn't the first time your work has discussed themes of identity and family, because your final major project, LCC, was a series of self-portraits of your mother. What drew you to self-portraiture as a way of representing family members?
I guess I've always been looking at pictures from the family album, and I started taking pictures related to that theme in particular my last year at LCC, and I guess I started using myself in the images because I wanted to reproduce images in which my mother was portrayed, and being away from home also, I wasn't really sure about sharing my intentions around the project with my family. So I use my own body in the images. So I guess that's how I got about to work with self-portrait. I was the most available subject, and I guess it was quite kind of a personal thing to use my family's history and wearing my mother's clothes. I guess that's what.
And were there conversations between you and your mother? I guess, like you said, you didn't really tell them that you were making this work, but I guess the family album, you know, were there any discussions about the family album?
Yes. So, yeah, I guess I was hiding my intentions, but then it all started when I made a trip to Togo, and it was, right before starting university, and I met my paternal grandmother, and she was this lovely lady. She was showing me pictures of my dad when he was younger and living in Togo. And it was really interesting that all of the images she was showing of him were studio portraits. So I went back home and I asked my mom, and she started telling me all these stories of how on a Sunday they would go out, wear their best clothes, go to church, and then they would stop by the photographer's studio to have their portraits taken. And to me, that was so interesting because it was this amazing Sunday ritual, and I wasn't aware of all of that. So I started looking at those family portraits in a very different way.
Was this just like every Sunday, Sylvia, or like
No,
every now and then kind of thing?
Every now and then, because basically they didn't own cameras, so they could go every now and then. Because obviously it wasn't too expensive, but it was expensive.
Yeah.
So I guess for important occasions or every other Sunday.
And were they quite, because the ones you've got, they're fantastic. Are they, were the family ones as well, were they quite performative as well, in the sense that yours are?
Definitely, yeah, because there's this idea of looking at your best in front of the camera. So the photographer becomes this director. My mom remembers very well how you would stand in front of him and he would tell you, you know, move to the right, or like direct your movements. So when in those rare occasions in which I photograph my mom, I'm just in front of the camera and she's just like posing, and I'm like, wow, you're a natural. And then I photograph my auntie and she does the same thing. So I'm like, whoa, what are you doing?
Do you find that quite hard or easy to embody when you were, because your images also have that kind of striking pose to them? Was that something that you made a conscious effort to put yourself in their shoes, even though it was just you and your camera?
Definitely, I'm very camera shy. Literally, I hate having my picture taken. So I guess I do this exercise of looking at pictures from the family album and observing people's gesture, because I find it really nice to look at those pictures, because in real life, you're not allowed to look at people for a long period of time unless you're photographing them, but you just don't stand in the street staring at people, which I often did as a kid, until my mom told me it's not polite to do so. So looking at pictures from the family album was so nice, in a sense that you could study people's gestures and body language, and that's what I do when I try to make an image. I just look at many other images and try to replicate those movements. All of that.
Sure, that's super interesting.
Have you got your family album sort of like online? Can you share it, or some of the images? Have you got any scans up? Or?
I do. Actually, I don't know where. Like, if I show you my laptop, like my desktop is an absolute mess. But if you want, while you speak, I can grab some actual images.
Yeah, go on. Let's see that, and then we can have a look a bit later. Everyone wants to see them, I'm sure.
Clementine, I was going to ask you, your project Fashion, how is it pronounced as well?
Fashion.
Fashion, okay. It's a long-term collaborative project with a participatory approach that involves community and children. And you were somewhat of, I guess, an outsider in gaining their trust, because obviously you're not a child as well, you're not part of these youth clubs, I'm assuming. How long did it take to build that trust before you could start taking these images?
Very quickly, actually, because I worked with Charlotte James, and we just approached the youth club. The thing is, it started very, very small. It was just like a one-off thing. We just approached the youth club. We said we just want to do a shoot with the children, and then it grew from there. And then it became, we approached the second youth group, and then slowly it became, you know, it's been 5 years now. It's quite a long time. And now we have this level of trust where, like, if I tell the youth worker, like, I want to bury the kids in the sand, she won't think I'm crazy, you know. She'll be like, oh yeah, that's great. So I think now it's amazing. Like, we can throw out ideas that are very, you know, we just say we want to do a shoot underwater, and then, like, yeah, great. Whereas maybe before it would be like, not sure about this. So I think, yeah, that took a long time. But the connection with the children, I think, yeah, it was pretty straightforward. It was like, do you want to take part? Yes, no.
Do they understand the essence of the project? I guess they haven't even worked with photography before.
I think at the beginning it was a bit awkward for them because, you know, like having a photographer coming, telling them not to smile in front of the camera, and like putting really, really weird clothes on them, and like shooting under the rain. And like for them it was very random. But I think since we had like the exhibition at the Martin Parr Foundation, and they were all invited to come in, so they saw the work on the wall, and they saw like the work being published like in the Guardian and like on big newspaper. They kind of, I think they really understood what was going on. But I think for a long time it was a bit strange for them.
Yeah, it must have been.
You know, because we were saying we're doing fashion, but we weren't.
Yeah, for sure. Was it were most of the kids up for it at first, or were there a few shy ones? Like, I feel like if someone asked me, I would have been absolutely
yeah. You know, we were telling them we were doing a fashion shoot, so they had this idea of what fashion is, but we weren't. Yeah, it was. I think, yeah, some of them were. I think they were all enjoying it. It's just some of them are more comfortable than others in front of the camera. And the thing is, we always wanted to work with the same children, so we started when they were like really children, and now they're teenagers. So things have changed a lot. Like, it's not the same anymore. They're not up for this, you know. They're way more conscious about what they're wearing and their makeup, their hair. People on the street looking at them. So all these things makes us rethink a bit more about what we're doing and try to approach it in a different way a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a performative aspect to your work as well, in a sense that of people you photograph playing with the camera. Have you found that the youth are more often more up to the idea of making image making, or do you have to spend time making them comfortable in front of the lens? You know, because there were some shy kids. So what was the kind of the approach to that?
Well, I'm not very good at like telling, you know, people what to do in front of the camera. I'm usually like, stay natural and that's it. I'm not telling them to put arms like that, or, you know, to do crazy things. It's usually really up to them. But what I don't like is when they start acting as if they were like taking selfies, which a lot of them are, because a lot of them are taking a lot of selfies. So the first instinct when they see a camera is like, you know, kind of poses. So I'm like, no. That's the only thing I try to control, but the rest is really up to them. And they're usually great. Naturally, they're just amazing. I don't have to say anything really. It's just their attitude and their confidence, and it's very strong.
Great. I was going to say, actually, this kind of leads on quite well to Colin. So your project, All Quiet on the Home Front, is a documentation of parenthood and childhood. And how did you find photographing your young one? And as she grew up in those 12 years, was there a lot of dialogue that had to happen to keep her comfortable in front of that lens?
I think it was different. I mean, it's like you asked me before about when you started photographing. So it's like when I started photographing my daughter, my family, that was a kind of a creative exercise in some way, kind of to stay sane, because before I'd photographed I'd done like travel and environment and things like that, especially in Asia. So this was kind of like, it was stuck at home. 9/11 had happened. She was born in 2001. And I kind of quickly realized it was like photographing the space around us as well, and the flat we were living in at the time. And then every weekend we'd go to these woods called Brown's Folly, and we just basically, to keep saying, we'd go out of the house. So the camera was always kind of integrated into that side of things, if you like. It wasn't kind of going to do a shoot or something. It was kind of part of it, and then sometimes it would get in the way too much.
Yeah.
So it was kind of part of the space and part of the environments, and part of the life, if you like. And then as she got older, you know, you know, what interested her or what she did. She didn't want to go to like Brown's Folly or these kind of woodlands places with loads of rope swings. I remember my wife was talking to me, I was trying to make sense of it, and she just kind of short-circuited everything and said, you know, because I was trying to work out what all these pictures were about, and she said something like, you know, look, you know, since the first day we was born, you've been taking her out, you've been taking her to the woods, to the river, and then suddenly, you know, she's 10 years old, or she's 11 years old, and she didn't want to go anymore. And you're kind of bereft and you're lost, and it's like a little bit of you's died. So that was the kind of change. But that's what kind of makes the project, if you like, because that's the kind of realization of, you know, you kind of invest yourself in someone or in this particular life, and then gradually that part of you dies a little bit, or quite a lot actually.
Well, I guess,
and something new comes along, hopefully.
Yeah, and I guess whether or not you were taking photos, that would have happened anyway. Like that's, I guess,
yeah,
like,
absolutely
of adolescence. And I was going to ask, actually, what was your wife's position in taking photos? Did she ever make it like a collaborative thing between you and her?
No, not at all. She kind of stays out of it. I mean, she's not that interested. Same as my daughter. Until recently, she wasn't interested in photography. I think she's just getting into it now. She's like finishing an art foundation. So my wife stays out of it. But she would be in lots of the pictures. So she'd stay out of it. In terms of getting involved, but she was definitely, especially when Isabel was younger, she was definitely in those images, and is part of the space, the environment, and that was just a very domestic space.
Yeah, there was no, carry on.
No, sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was also just going to say about like, it all sounds like quite like peaceful, but I know that I read an article about when you were describing the project, and you talked about how it's also a lot to do with like your deeply set fears of parenthood, and I think that's a really interesting thing to openly discuss, and I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit more about those fears.
Yeah, because I remember when Isabel was born, and like any parent who's ever had, you know, the first child, we've only got one child, had a child, and you kind of come home one day with this baby, and it's alive, and it's cries at night, and then, you know, she was, you know, there was no major problems or anything like that. It's just like, you've got a baby that needs feeding, and that eats and sleeps and wakes up and cries in the middle of the night and needs its nappy changing, and it's suddenly, you know, I mean, this is for me. I mean, for my wife, it's a completely different ball game again, and your hormones have just gone through the roof. My hormones have gone in sympathy through the roof, and it's actually quite visible. And then you're stuck in this space. Your working life is kind of has. I was caring a lot for my daughter as well. Your working life has kind of disappeared. Your horizons have kind of narrowed. You're doing things like you're watching, I don't know, Teletubbies or Tweenies or whatever, and that's like the height of excitement. And so the kind of horizons suddenly narrow, and you've got a child that you have to look after, and it's hard work. Like during isolation, the people I really feel for, anyone with like kids, with one kid, two kids, is absolutely mind-numbing what you have to go through. So that changes who you are, and that changes how you see the world. And even things like the domestic space that you live in, that changes, and the way that you see things. Suddenly you become everything becomes really close. Everything the size changes. I remember my daughter, some friends came around with their kid, and Isabel was about 8 months old, and their kid was like a year and a half. And I remember this kid coming through the door, and he could walk and everything, and just your whole faculties have just gone out the window. And I remember seeing this kid, and it was in my mind, he's like about 10 foot tall, but he's not just because he's bigger. He's just a different timescale, and your way of seeing has changed into this kind of tiny little focused world. Yeah. And then as they grow older, there's just the chaos of a toddler who's just using the flat as a kind of climbing frame, and you as a climbing frame, your wife as a climbing frame, and it's great. But it's completely insane. Kids are mental. They're just beyond. They're like really weird drunks. They're just absolutely berserk. They are. I don't know. Yeah.
Did you
So all of that changes absolutely.
Yeah. Did you stop taking photographs in 2017 of your daughter, or do you still take them? And is it something that you think, like, even when she gets into I guess she already is in young adolescence, but when she's in her 20s, it's something you feel like you'll still be able to create?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of eased off as well, because so the 2017, that was one of the broken camera pictures. So yeah, it's just eased off, because it's there'll be a different chapter in there somewhere. Yeah, I'd like to, but not at the moment. It's not going to happen. It's just isn't going to happen. It's like it has quite firmly stopped, I think.
Yeah.
But hopefully it will come back. But it has stopped.
Yeah.
I still photograph her, but not in that same. There's photographs and photographs.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I guess there's another age, isn't it? It's a whole other generational thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, Tami also, her project is about you and your dad, as well as the relationship with your dad as well. Do you think that changes when you're doing photography, when you're photographing your dad? Does that change the relationship?
I was going to say, actually, it feels quite funny talking to you, Colin, because I'm doing the polar opposite, because I'm there taking photos of my dad. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but there's like a sense of urgency to create work. And now I'm living here at home, it's a bit different, but whilst I was living in Peckham, anytime I saw him, I thought, oh God, I should have brought my camera, and and I felt this like pressure. And when I let go of that pressure of having to come away with work every time, I started to realize that when we're together, I'm constantly noticing things about him, and that later on down the line, that finds its way into the work. Like, when I come home and I see the post-it notes all over the house, that's what it took for me to think, oh, that's an image. Like those post-it notes saying the dog's in the car, turn the oven off, like your appointments at this time, we're at the shops, this complete abundance of text, which is just a normality in the family home, is something that later on came into the images. And I feel like potentially, I feel like maybe I'm more hyper aware of Dad's memory loss, because when I was a kid, my whole life he's had this short-term memory illness, and so it wasn't new to me, and that's just how he always was. And so I wasn't constantly thinking about the fact that my dad has a disability until I started the project, and I started to notice all these things that most dads or most people aren't living this way. So I think in that sense it has changed. I'm more aware.
They're very playful. I mean, is he involved in the making of them, or are they replicating aspects of his illness or his personality or his self?
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the one on the screen of him on the stage doing that pose with his that one.
Yeah.
With the curtains behind him.
Yeah, they're definitely recreations. When I first started the project in second year, It was more of like a video dialogue of just conversations and trying to pick out these parts of Dad saying he's forgotten something, and it just didn't feel right. Like, it felt like I was trying to capture something that I was meant to do, like I was meant to show his illness. And when I realized actually the thing that's more interesting about Dad, and the thing that I find the most amazing about him, is his sense of humor and his upbeat energy. And I thought, well, it makes no sense to not make that the focus of the work. And yeah, they are kind of recreations of old memories. So the standing on the stage is a kind of illustration of Dad walking up and down the stairs, forgetting what he was going up there for, which is a common occurrence. And I thought, if we elevate this and we collaborate with it, you're taking agency of those sometimes vulnerable moments, and it shows more. I think those images show a sense of power and like perseverance, rather than a sense of like vulnerability and illness, which is something I wanted to portray.
I'm just wondering, was that a kind of deliberate thing? Because I think probably everybody here has a certain energy, but you especially, you know, there was that playfulness, and that's that kind of pleasure which takes it. I mean, is there the danger of you either going like super morbid, and were you kind of aware of that? Was that kind of deliberate to take it away from that kind of, you know, that heavy photography? You know, it's everything grim kind of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like obviously there are tough times, and that's something, like, I admit it's only a year on this project, you know, like most of us doing FMPs, and I know this is much longer than a year-long project, and I hope in that time I do still discuss those trickier times where Dad's lacking in self-confidence, or gets stressed or disorientated, and I feel like they are equally important to portray. But they're obviously harder to portray because they're difficult times, and you don't want to whip out a camera when someone's feeling upset, especially your dad. But I felt like, yeah, there was this idea of documenting parental illness, and it was typically quite morbid and black and white and documentary, and I just didn't think that was the correct way of portraying our relationship or him, and I didn't think that would do him justice. So that's why I thought, we'll have fun with it and see what comes out, and what came out was quite the opposite, I think.
I love the text, what you did with the text. It's really interesting.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing that.
I think
have you got like, yeah, me too, have you got like a million post-it notes?
Yeah, I've been asking Mum, because obviously they're used to having them, and they're used to just chucking them away because they're not valuable assets of the family home. So now I'm trying to remind Mum and now I'm here just to hold on to all of them, because I feel like I'd love to have an archive of, you know, thousands of post-it notes, because some of them are, I mean, they're not even all on as neat a thing as a post-it note. There's often like empty pill boxes which say like take back the suit to H&M, or like letters which have just been discarded and have like the shopping list, or, you know, remember to take the dog out or whatever. So they're kind of everywhere, and I would like to in time gather those, but because I didn't have an abundance of them, I thought to start I'll pick out the ones that I find the most striking, and I use like manually I cut out the card and painted it myself in the same way we manually get the pen and write it down. But I don't know if they'll always exist in the context of landscape, and maybe they will exist as their own pieces, kind of like Keith Arnott's work.
Yeah, I think I've seen some videos as well of your dad. I was wondering if those are part of your final work as well.
They were what I originally started with, and I feel like I've started to understand them more as research. But I wanted to bring them back via potentially the audio rather than the actual imagery, because I feel like that doesn't particularly add anything. But I think the audio of Dad speaking is something I definitely want to do more of in the future, for sure. I was going to go on to Tino's work, because Tino's also working with family in her final major project. Tino, you describe your project, The Blue Table, as a collaboration with your cousin Marilyn in Zimbabwe. Have you found working on a collaborative project with your family member who's in a different country quite difficult or empowering?
I don't know if it was difficult. I think it was another way of connecting and reconnecting with her, because you know, I haven't been back home for like 10 years now, and so, you know, we have this kind of communication of like, you know, over WhatsApp, where we just kind of talk there and there. But actually doing this project together meant that we were reconnecting on things that that we once shared together. And so it was a really nice collaborative project to start. Yeah.
For sure. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what the Blue Table is?
So the Blue Table is basically I lived with Marilyn, and her mum, which is my auntie, took care of me the first 10 years of my life back home in Zimbabwe. And through that time, my parents were migrated to the UK for, I guess, for work, for better life. And so when I was back home, I never really felt like, you know, I was alone or anything like that, because I had Marilyn's family who took me in really well. And so this house that I grew up in, the table is within the kitchen setting. And so this kitchen has stayed exactly the same, which was really interesting. And this came out of the collaborative project where we're exchanging these images together. And she showed me the kitchen, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like it literally stayed exactly the same. And so that's how we kind of got to the table, where, you know, it's a place where I've kind of built a lot of myself from this kitchen, from family to union. You know, that kind of act of breaking bread is kind of come from the Blue Table. And that's where it kind of started, yeah.
Sure. Such like a centralized part of your memory, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I don't think I would have got into the Blue Table if it wasn't because of the collaborative and communicating together. Because originally I wanted to go home myself, which was the plan, but I couldn't go because of COVID, so that stopped me. But I think it's something that I still need to go back home and do myself. But I think the process has helped me to get to this stage of the table and to develop from that, I guess. Yeah,
for sure. I was going to ask also, like you were mentioning how you would have liked to have taken the photographs yourself. What do you think would have been different if that was the case, or when that happens, what do you plan to take?
If I had done that myself, I don't think I would have got into that. I think I was more interested in outside, because most memories that I have is me playing outside with other kids. Just, you know, I remember memories of bike riding with kids in the streets. And so I think I would have been more interested in the outside than the inside of the house, which is quite interesting that I ended up here. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I was going to ask some open questions to everyone again, like we did at the beginning. I was going to ask, do you feel that photographing family and community has had a large impact on your practice in general? Like, do you feel like it's impacted the way you shoot?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I mean, photographing community, I like photographing communities in a very immersive way. So for me, it changed where I live, what I do. Yeah, it did change a lot. I don't photograph family that much personally. I do photograph my parents and my brothers, but nothing more than that. But communities, it's a never-ending debate. You know, it's always so many questions on what ethically right, ethically not right. Well, I don't know if you can say that, but so yeah, it's always questions you ask to yourself and making sure you take everyone on board. Quite a tricky thing. Yeah.
Sylvia, do you feel like it's affected anything else you photograph, like the way you've learned self-portraiture and I guess research as well?
Yeah, I guess I guess communications and chats with my mom had a big influence in the way I work. What I did with the jury with photographs, I would spend some time chatting with my mom over the phone, and we would just have a normal conversation where, though I was on the other side, kind of taking notes, not because I was interviewing her, but just because I was scared of missing out on details or forgetting something. So we would have a normal conversation, and then I would ask her about her life in Italy as a migrant. And I guess writing down informations and stories and then being in the studio and trying to replicate them, that's what changed. Because before I was very much working by myself, finding informations in the family album or reading letter as I did for my graduation project. But then when I started having a direct conversation with my mom, then that had a different element where it wasn't something that I was building and putting together as a detective, but it was a matter of turning into image an account, something that someone has told me, and that's her truth. So I guess that added a certain element. So that changed the way I photographed a little bit, I guess.
That's really interesting. Colin, what about yourself?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's like Tino said. I mean, Tino talking about the blue table, and also outside in the way in which you kind of connect to different elements of the place, but even things like faces and like Sylvia says, the stories that people have. I mean, I've got a German family. My mother's German. I've got a German family album from the 1930s, which is you've got personal histories, you've got emotional histories, you've got political histories. And I think all those things start getting entwined, and I think it becomes, you just get, everything is so entwined and wound up, and I think those deeper significances and meanings, they just become more apparent, and I think it's quite difficult to go to photographing other things or things in a slightly different way. And it's like, as Clementine said, it's like, how do you create that immersion so that you do have that involvement in some way with the people, with the places that you're photographing. So yeah, definitely, I think it does. I think it's difficult. Family is difficult.
Yeah.
And any kind of immersive photography is kind of difficult. It's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
In a good way.
Like to have a challenge.
Yeah.
For sure. I think we've almost run out of time, but I think we have one more question from us, and then we'll move on to Q&A, and maybe we can see some of Sylvia's archive as well.
Yeah, please. I guess we all share the idea of collaboration, participatory, through identity and family, community. And there's a sense of consent and trust that comes with portraying identity in photography. Can anyone talk about how they managed to negotiate this question of consent with their subject? Yeah. Tami?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when talking of memory, I feel like people often assume, or when working with someone who's ill, I think people often assume that the consent is a bit more difficult. But I feel like for me personally, or my relationship with my dad, it came from like a lifelong sense of trust. So I don't know if that's maybe different to other circumstances, but and it's probably the same for Colin as well. But like I guess me and my dad have always trusted each other, and we know that we're not going to do anything to hurt one another, and we're always talking about things. So I guess that's where the consent came, was by making it more collaborative. It was always about asking him, does this sound like something that portrays the memory well? Or he'll come up with ideas, so it has to become more of a conversation rather than like an art direction. But yeah, I think that it was from the father-daughter relationship like internal trust of doing right by each other meant that the images could never really come out wrong, at least not to us at least.
I guess it's the relationship that is coming out of this that makes like this consent and trust. And I mean, I had my relationship with Marilyn, who's my cousin that I lived with, and I guess that kind of relationship made it okay. And also because we shared the same history, so it was it's kind of natural to do this collaborative project. Colin, is that something that's similar to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're both talking kind of like this kind of community of consent. I mean, with my daughter especially, because she's a child, there's, you know, the idea of consent and informed consent, and this has been raised with other people. It doesn't really apply, it doesn't exist. So is the consent is, in a way, it's coming from the situation, the community and the family, and maybe wider photographic practice. I really don't know. I'm still kind of confused about where the consent comes from, because but I think it was that. I mean, like some of my earlier projects as well, there was a kind of testing the waters, and then you see who responds to them. And I think because of the people who responded to them in photography and the way they responded, I think that created a level of consent and understanding of the work. I think it came from other people who are outside the family in a really, really, really strange way.
Well, I think it all depends where the picture ends up, no?
And that's also the question. Yeah, absolutely.
The thing is, like, as long as the project is really protected and it's in context, it doesn't. I think the problem is when it ends up, you know, you being shown on not billboards, but you know, when the picture just travels so far and you lose all control about how people interpret how you said, the interpretation over the image. I think that's tricky for me, at least with children. Is like, you know, I want to protect as much as I can the pictures, make sure they don't, you know, go too far away, but to protect the children. But that's with internet and everything is so hard to control it. It's so hard.
Were the parents always understanding of you taking images?
Yeah, the parents are 100% like aware of what's going on. It's just like trust, like us making sure the pictures are not being used in the wrong way, or how people what people say in articles, in comments, and all this negativity sometimes you see, and it's so it hurts, but at the same time, you know, it hurts for the models, it hurts for everyone, right?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah. Do you have any issues with consent or with your mother?
I guess I've been thinking a lot about it, because even if I don't photograph members of my family that often, I'm sharing their stories. So I guess I've been thinking about this idea of consent quite a lot. But then I guess my work speaks about that story, which is also mine, and the reason why I tried to find out more about my parents' migration is because I'm trying to understand my position as a Black Italian. I'm trying to understand why I'm here and what's my family's history. So I guess that justifies a little bit me sharing those stories.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
I always wonder as well, do you think that photography is kind of, we talk about consent for photography, but we don't talk about consent for an oral history or a written history or a film history in the same way? I'm just wondering if people think we maybe fetishize our images a bit too much, or the way that we talk about images in this particular setting Whereas in other settings, you know, images, they're just people make images, people reproduce images all the time. I don't know. Do you think we what's the word? Problematicize images because there's that kind of tradition and history of doing so?
I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, I just think of the way I look at pictures from my family album of my parents' migration, and they sort of resemble those images taken in the studio, but then the setting is slightly different. They're in a room, or but then they still wear their best clothes. Like sometimes I look at those images and I ask my mom, "Wow, you look fly. Where were you going?" And she just says, "Oh, I wasn't going anywhere. I was just wearing this because I wanted to look like this in front of the image." And when she says that, I'm overcharging the image with this idea of migrants wanting through their own image to distance themselves from what the Italian community thought about them and thought about that image. So I see those photographs as a way of my mom and my dad shaping their own identity in that context of migration. But then I'm really not sure about that. Maybe I'm overcharging the image with significances that are not really there. Maybe they were just taking an image. So I guess we do, and we don't know the past. So when we look back, we always imposing our.
I guess it's the same as most art, isn't it? When you go to a gallery or wherever, you just look online, like you're already thinking about what it means. And obviously, being at university, it's something we have to question a lot. And sometimes it maybe is coming to the decision that actually maybe some of these don't mean that much at all. They're just being captured. But I guess, like, as humans, we always want to uncode things and understand things and make sense of things. So that must be something to do with it. I just spotted the time, so I'm going to open up to any Q&As. If anyone's got any, just pop them in the chat. Oh, we got one already straight away. Phoebe has asked, Clementine, you work with the stylist Charlotte James, and it seems as if both of your work sit so well together. How did you form that collaborative relationship?
So Charlotte's actually, people say Charlotte's as a stylist, but she's actually a creative director, so she's not that much involved in the styling of the kids. I think we really we found each other in a really beautiful way, because we weren't aware of each other, and then I saw her work, she saw my work, and we kind of met there. And it's the first time I work with someone so closely. I think photography, it's very hard to be that collaborative. It's usually such a lonely experience. And working with Charlotte it really pushed me out of my comfort. Definitely, she's always suggesting things that I wouldn't think about. Also, the fact that she's from that place where we're working also means that she's bringing so much knowledge about the culture there and what the community, that for me was really important because I was an outsider. She just has a very amazing understanding of images, and she studied fashion, so she's bringing that element that I studied documentary, so for me fashion was, I was very intimidated by that world, and it's been just really fun to experiment with someone else and not being alone in carrying it's quite a complex project with kids and parents and social workers and applications of fundings and exhibitions, publication. We have so many little things to think about all the time, especially how to make it safe for everyone, and especially right now with the COVID. And so it's just amazing to have someone else to help you with all the things. We're just stronger, two people. Yeah, I really don't think I could do it on my own. So it's been good. It's been really good.
Great. Cool. I don't know if anyone else has any questions, or anyone here has any questions for one another. Otherwise.
I mean, we're also waiting for Sylvia's images.
What?
Sylvia.
Sorry, I can't hear properly. What was that?
We're still waiting for your iPad.
Oh yeah. I got 3.
Oh, great.
So I got this one.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
There's no date on it, but there's just a stamp from the studio where it was taken in Loma.
Amazing.
And I guess this one, it's a wedding picture.
Wow. Those steps are really evident in all the images, aren't they?
Yeah, very. And this one's got the date as well, 1981. I guess, yeah, those 2 are from the same studio. And I guess it was the same day, 12th of February.
Amazing.
I guess this is a wedding picture. I'm not sure why my mom has it here in Italy. I'm gonna ask her.
Did you hand make the steps in your images as well?
I did, yeah. I did in both projects actually.
Oh, amazing. That's great. It must felt really interesting to be both the photographer in that position, like being the studio designer and everything, as well as being all these people from your past.
Yeah, it was quite fun because it was sort of like a ritual again, like coming into the studio and building the set every time. Because I met you when you were assisting Luke and Nick. And I was using that studio, so all the time I was building those steps and working in that environment. So it was, yeah, I guess the making of the images is quite fun as well.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, honestly. Great, I think that's us for time. That was a really interesting conversation, and great to hear all your different perspectives on and around the idea of making kin. To everyone who's watching, we've got our virtual degree show launch on Thursday on theorymakertiger.co.uk. We still got a few more days of week 2, and we have a whole other week 3 of talks and roundtables, so please come along, and workshops too. Great, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Colin, Clementine, Sylvia, and Tino, especially.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Bye.